Welcome to the IVM Podcast Network.
You're listening to the Paodcast, presented by the Daily Pao.
This is Pranati,
Amit,
Roshni,
and we're from a city-specific culture and food website called The Daily Pao, and this is our fortnightly podcast,
The
Paodcast. So now there's a difference. There's a new person this episode. We have Roshni Bajaj Sangvi, who we've had in a previous episode. She's our sort of unofficial fourth Pao.
Now Roshni writes a food column for us called Monthly Specials, which you probably read on the site, and she's here because Purva is on holiday again, and so Roshni has very kindly come in to sub for her, and this will be, I think, about the fifth out of the last sixth ones where Purva has relinquished her spot as the Bombay Binge
Bombay Binge person.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of Bombay Binge, this episode we'll be interviewing Chef Atul Kochhar. After that, in the scene, we'll be speaking to Simin Patel and Hashim Badani about their book on Irani cafes, which should be out in the next year. And finally, in Metro Station, we'll be speaking to Patel and Badani about their blog Bombaywalla. So stay tuned for Bombay Binge.
Bombay Binge.
So in Bombay Binge this time, we'll be speaking to Atul Kochhar, who is a UK-based chef. Chef Kochhar has opened two establishments in Bombay, NRI and Lima, both of them in BKC this year. So Roshni, do you wanna start?
Sure. So, well, tell us about how you've opened restaurants around the world, several locations, most recently in Mumbai and Madrid. What were the unique challenges about opening a restaurant in Mumbai?
Before I answer that, I need to know, you guys are all Pao. What am I? What
What are you?
Yeah. Or maybe you could be like a modern Indian vada, because that's your thing.
And that you can change it according to the flavor you need.
Exactly.
Very clever Paos you are. I have to say that. Right, back to your question, Roshni. Challenges are depending on people, place, the demographics you have in front of you. I think it poses challenge in its own way. So challenges in Mumbai were, people challenge were actually minimal, because I think the talent is humongous in this country. Finding people was not very difficult. I've seen my compatriots, people in the same, my peers in the industry moan about the talent. I only want to say, come to London, come to Madrid, then you'll realize what the challenges are. This is nothing. You have wealth of people. We just need to know how to use them. So,
but by people, do you mean people that you employ in the kitchen? Is that what you're talking
I think everywhere, and on all the sections, to be honest, in all the parts of the restaurant industry, right on the top, starting from admin, going down to accounting, going down to bookkeeping, service, and also kitchen. I think talent is there. How you nurture them that's the main challenge, and that's part of my challenge, not their challenge. Mm-hmm. And if I'm not good at it, I'm not going to be good at it. I think working in Europe and working in different countries, I have learned there is nothing called perfection. You have to work with things. You have to make things work for yourself. That way, that word in India, what we call jugaad, that really comes alive. And that helps me everywhere, wherever I'm in the world. And then challenges here are on different level. That is on supply chain. That's a massive challenge. And I'm struggling with it, I'm battling with it, but I haven't given up. We started with looking at the markets, what we can get, and then we also befriended a farm who are growing things for us. Then we also acquired 8 acres of our own farmland. We started growing our own.
Is this vegetables for...
Yeah, at the moment it's only vegetables.
Right.
Where is it?
It's in Ganeshpuri.
Okay.
And I haven't gone on to keep the animals at the moment, but who knows?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because you sort of emphasize on local produce wherever you know, that's been one of the things that you...
I do, and it's not out of any fashion or that's the trend. I'm not doing that, because purely when you buy local stuff, you have to do so little, because you have work with nature, you work with seasons. The flavors are already there. All you have to do is, as a culinary person, you have to modify it, and that's all I do.
Yeah. And, you talked about the people, but what about, like, we hear all the time from restaurateurs here how there's so much red tape involved. There's a whole administratively setting up a restaurant is a huge challenge. Is that something you face? I mean, was there a big gap between, say, the decision to come here and open these restaurants and actually launching? Like, was that an elongated period of time?
So the way I run my business, I never get bogged down by the admin rubbish, to be honest. So I hire a team for that.
Sure.
And I let them handle it. It's their problem. I'm a creative person. If I get involved in that, it'll be too much for me to handle. So I try not to do that. There's a cost to it, so be it. I get on with what I want to do, what I'm best at. I'm not good at dealing with administrators. If I go, can you imagine acquiring 68 or 70 different licenses in Mumbai? I'll go crazy. It's a lifetime job. I'm not going to do it. I'll get somebody to do it.
Yeah.
That gets done.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a fine example of jugaad.
Well, you know what? Even in, for example, in London, if I had to open a restaurant, which actually I'm going to open another one in January, and this time I'm going different way, I'm going British restaurant. I have to go through all licensing issues and everything, but there's a team for it. And hand it over to them and they do it.
So when had you decided, like, because you launched NRI in Jan this year, right? And so when had you decided that you were going to open it? Like, was it a big time period between that?
To open in India?
Yeah.
So time period was there, to be honest. I've lived abroad for 23 years now. And I come back to motherland every year, 2-3 times a year, because my parents lived here. Their mom still lives here. It never occurred to me that I will ever open a restaurant here. And just out of the blue, my dad passed away, and I thought, damn, what I'm going to do? Dad isn't there now. Mom comes to London often. I need to come back to India. So I had to find a reason to remain associated. And yeah, my own culinary skill came handy, and my business partner was keen to do something in India. And we started looking around. So last 3 years, we kind of came back and studied the market, looked at different things, and were very excited to see how food industry had developed. Looking at someone like Riaz Amlani, who's a hero of mine, Mr. Kalra.
Right.
Yeah, and also Olive Group, to be honest. All of it, to be honest. They're inspirational. They're homegrown brands. They didn't go abroad and bought a package and brought it over and unfurled it and say, come on guys, come eat with us. They developed piece by piece. And that's what I wanted to do. So I didn't bring Banaras. I could have easily done that.
Yeah.
So I wanted to grow something which belongs to India, and it has come out of India. So hence NRI.
But was Bombay your first choice? Because you're not from Bombay. I mean, you grew up in Delhi.
Jamshedpur,
You know what?
Jamshedpur.
Actually, it's very difficult for anybody to say where I'm from.
Right.
Punjabi family, born in Bihar, studied in Chennai, worked in Delhi, worked part of my life in Bombay. I actually myself don't know where I'm from. So hence I left India.
Right.
And becoming NRI was a better choice. So yes, I didn't grow substantial. I wasn't here for substantial part of my life. But Mumbai, I've been coming to Mumbai for a very long time. And Mumbai has always intrigued me because it comes out to be more cosmopolitan, more foodie city.
Right.
Going out culture is more vibrant.
But it's interesting you say that because we often compare Bombay and Delhi, and the consensus is that sort of just the quality and the variety of food in Delhi is far better. So I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
In Bombay, there's only one thing is not there in Bombay. Don't you know who I am? That's not there in Bombay.
Right.
And that's a big thing for me.
Right.
To start somewhere where people are not pretentious. I'm not saying Delhi people are pretentious, but
It's okay, you can say that.
Yeah,
This is a Bombay
we're down with
podcast. we don't mind any sort of,
Delhi
Delhi
bashing.
bashing.
Delhi bashing is good. I love it.
We
Because
join you.
Having lived in Delhi, I can do Delhi bashing. No, but honestly, that arrogance isn't there, which I absolutely adored about Mumbaikars. I have always loved dealing with people from Mumbai. And whenever I have done anything in Mumbai, I was hugely appreciated. It went a long way for me. So it became a first choice. And also in terms of real estate, I compared like for like, and I had to be a little bit, I put on my businessman hat. And Mumbai real estate in terms of commercial properties was a lot better value than Delhi. Delhi was somewhere in cuckoo lands. So I said,
Really?
okay, I'll let go, let them sweat a bit. And then once I made the brand, they would be inviting me to come over. So I'll wait for my
Yes,
time.
we like this tenor.
So how did you select BKC then?
So location. Okay, everybody talked about Juhu and then South Bombay. So I did my tours, and I thought, okay, the trick is not into what has happened so far. Trick is into finding what's going to happen next and where it's going to happen.
Okay.
And I saw BKC was the place. Everything is moving towards BKC. Okay, I'll punt on that. I'll put my money on BKC, and that was the only reason. And I'm actually quite happy that I've done that, because I can see most of the financial world is moving that way. And some of the housing is also coming up there, which is great. But I wanted to be in the business district, and that was my choice.
And I was about to ask, how's that working out? Like, your customers, what do they say about coming to BKC for a meal?
I think they're loving it, to be honest. And I quite surprisingly, I thought that Sunday would be a pretty dull day. People wouldn't be around. We are packed on Sunday.
Because parking is not an issue.
And when we went to Lima, we saw a whole bunch of ladies who lunch at dinner time. So, clearly that's not being like a...
But, speaking of Lima, I mean, do you want to tell us about, why you decided to open a South American, a Peruvian restaurant in Bombay? And Roshni, do we have a precedent of Peruvian or South American food in the city?
So we've had the occasional festival, which I have a feeling it's one of the least understood cuisines in our city. Peruvian for sure. I think maybe like restaurants have attempted ceviches and taken them off the menu.
But we've never had like a full-fledged...
No, we've never.
Yeah. So what was the thinking behind that?
Thinking was very simple, to be honest. And I've been touring Latin America for quite some time now, mainly for holiday purposes, and also I absolutely fell in love with Brazil. And then when I saw Mexico, I thought, wow, this is home away from home. They actually use the same ingredients that we do. They use chilies, they use cumin, they use tomato, they use garlic, they use coriander, you name it. They have the whole jing-bang what we have. And it's just the sequence is very different. The way I would add coriander, they would add it very differently. The way I would make my chutney, they would make their mole very differently. So all those things made me think that actually these are the same ingredients we use day in, day out in our country. We can't be so far away. If we put them right, it'll work. And that was the main thought. And then when I was introduced to Peruvian food, I thought, wow, the biggest example of cuisine being celebrated well in the world, and I have witnessed it myself, is the British cuisine. I know, if you just look at English cuisine, it's damn boring, but British cuisine is very rich. It has got essence from Asia, Africa, China, India, you name it. They have it all in British cuisine, and hence British cuisine has taken over from French and American or anyone, to be honest, because they embodies everything in their own cuisine. And I thought, next one is actually Peruvian. If you look at it, they have so many influences. They have Chinese, they have Japanese, they have Korean, they have Spanish, they have their own indigenous cuisine, and they are vibrant. They are happy to absorb more if they want to. And that'll become the cuisine for tomorrow, to be honest. So I said, well, let's work with it today. And hence, we opened a restaurant, we call it Latin American restaurant. With Peruvian is huge emphasis on that, but we haven't forgotten Mexican and Brazilian and Argentinian on that. They are core part of our menu, to be honest. And we are going to experiment with all of it.
Well, we were just, before we started recording this podcast, we were talking about the ceviche. And, as Roshni said, it's an item that's been taken off menus because ceviche essentially is raw fish. Was that something that you were concerned about, how people would take to raw fish?
Yeah, so in India we have had the inhibition of thinking raw fish and how to eat that. We haven't done that. Culturally we haven't done that, so it's a massive challenge. But it's also part of the education. If you look at a big number of Indians are going abroad now, and they are experimenting, they are traveling, they are eating in different places. One of the most celebrated Peruvian restaurant in London is called Koya. And 70 or 80% of the clients are Indians.
Yeah.
In month of May and June, you got to win a lottery to get a table there, to be honest.
Yeah.
Right.
It's really difficult. And these folks are eating all sorts of fish, all sorts of raw fish, and you name it. So I thought, we can't be far away from it. And if I stick to local, and if my produce is right, if I pay the prime stuff, get the prime stuff on my menu, I think we'll be okay. And I think that's what we have done. And nobody has ever come back and complained. Actually, ceviche is one of the best-selling items on the menu. People are loving it. So I think it's the also educating people as time goes by. We have always associated cooking with heat.
Right.
But there's cooking without heat also. Cooking is also curing. Cooking
Right.
is also salting. Cooking is also through acid. And in this case, the moment you put tiger milk, which is essentially lime juice, and then some flavors, meat actually starts getting cooked immediately. And something like fish, which is really very soft protein, gets cooked within 3 minutes. So it's actually cooked.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this actually brings me to the thought: how did you adapt it to Peruvian food or Latin American food is very meat heavy, like
Orientated.
centered,
Yeah.
meat centric, but you've managed to put a lot of vegetarian food for Bombay on Lima's menu. Tell us a little bit about that.
Latin American food is a lot around carne, around meat, but they eat lots of vegetables. So I had to focus more on vegetables and chicken and fish rather than red meat. And as world is becoming a healthier place, we are thinking more consciously what we eat, what we put in our guts. People are moving away from red meat, and so they are in Latin America also. So all the famous chefs from there, if you follow them, if you look at them, they have more vegetarian, chicken and fish on the menu. Actually, more vegetarian. We strongly talk about in chef forums, in the world chef forums, that the plates will be full of vegetables soon, and the meat would be the garnish, or non-vegetarian things would be the garnish. If you don't want it, we'll take the garnish away, but you still have your vegetables. So world is going that way.
Oh no,
Wow.
that sounds terrible
Yeah.
for meat lovers like us.
And one of the reasons you're here
We'll
actually
adapt.
is you're in town to launch a new menu for NRI, right? Which serves the food of the diaspora. So since it's just about 6 months old, and you've already sort of presented a whole range of dishes.
Yes.
So could you tell us a little bit about the new menu and what's on it and
So about the new menu, the way we want to go about doing it, that it's also the essence, it's also the way you feel, it's also the weather which is happening around Mumbai at the time. It's monsoon, and as an Indian, what do you love when monsoon comes? I run for pakoras and samosas.
yeah.
So my thoughts were let's have things which are deep fried.
Okay.
They're dirty, I know that, but I love it. Who doesn't love it? Tell me. I'll do my
we all
yoga.
love it.
I'll do my yoga in the morning, but give me the deep fried pakoras and samosa. So I've gone with that. So we have gone for curry puffs. We have gone for some chicken pakoras. So
Okay.
something very simplistic, but we have brought flavors from Malaysia, South Africa, Caribbean. So just to share the other part of India's story, that what has happened around the globe.
But then again, are these places that have like similar weather, or is the deep fried is the inspiration?
I think deep fried is the inspiration. Not only deep fried, but I've gone on to baking and also roasting and all that.
Yeah.
But it has mainly been the inspiration, to be honest, that what nostalgia rain brings. And I think it's all
Yeah.
about that. Whether the weather is same in those places or not. If I talk about London, there's monsoon 12 months in a
See,
year.
that's true. Yeah.
So
And
there isn't much of nostalgia from
do
there.
you want to talk about the original, some of the dishes that you put on because the NRI menu is almost like it's an education, right? Because you sort of go there and you see and you learn about how all these different dishes were created. So for the new ones that you...
For example, one of the items is, the bunny chow. And interestingly, the bunny chow has made its way to several restaurants in the city.
Seems to become
Very quickly.
Yeah,
quickly,
that's-
become like
very
the
quickly.
new...
butter
Yeah.
chicken bunny
Copycats.
chow, mushroom korma bunny chow.
Yeah, everything. Basically, you can just put anything in it, right? So it's like...
So, in a lot of ways, it's kind of vada pav story, in my opinion. You can make any flavor of vada you want, to be honest. So bunny chow is essentially a bread casing, and people could put anything that they fancy. So we started with very technical ones about what South Africa would do. They had a bean curry. There are many stories around bunny chow. A lot of people say it has because there was a bania who was cooking it. That's why it became a bania chow, and it was served by a
Right.
Chinese guy. So
Right.
bania and chow. Indians were also called banias in South Africa. So there are 1,000 stories about it. So we started with beans, and we gone to chicken, and we also had pork in between for experiment, and then also goat curry. So slowly we are experimenting, and there's a new one. I think for the season we are putting a shakalaka,
Shakalaka.
Tell us about
What's
it.
that?
Shakalaka. So shakalaka is more of a spicy version with peppers, and if I make it slightly more desi version of it, then it's slightly more going towards the kadhai chicken kind of story.
Okay.
But it's with peppers. It's peppery. It's hot. It's spicy. The bread actually becomes a lot more leaner in that, slightly crispier as well. So you fancy eating that when there's rain happening outside and you don't feel like stepping out, so you want to stay indoors. And a nice cup of masala chai with that. You dug in.
It's definitely a fun-sounding item.
Yeah.
It is, definitely.
Is this going
Definitely.
to happen often? You're going to be changing the menu often?
So it happens all the time, if I may say that. So my menus are always small, and we change it very often because I believe in keeping up with the seasons. I believe keeping up with people's thoughts. I believe in keeping it with what Mother Nature gives us, because it gets boring otherwise. I can have 250 dishes on the menu like many others and not change it for the next 3 years, but I rather keep 20 dishes on the menu and change it many times.
Well, thanks so much, Chef Kochhar.
No, thank you.
Thanks so much
this
for being
was-
on, and all our listeners. I'm sure most of you have been to both NRI and Lima, but in case you haven't, you know what to do next, where to eat next.
Absolutely. Come and try Hai Chai.
Yeah, especially
And-
in this weather.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And thank you guys. Thank you for having me as a special vada on the menu.
Super. Well,
Our
anyway,
pleasure.
stay
We'll be
tuned
back.
for the scene.
Hello there, my name is Naveen Narona, and as a gay person in India, I get asked a lot of stupid questions.
Beta, is it LGBT or eligibility?
How do two men procreate?
Bro, is Grindr better than Tinder or what?
We answer all these questions and much more on my podcast, Keeping It Queer, where I talk to individuals from the LGBT community in India and learn about their personal stories. Catch all the episodes on the IVM Podcast app or any other podcasting app you like. Till then, keep it queer.
The scene.
So today in the scene, we're going to be speaking to Simin Patel and Hashim Badani. Hashim is a photographer, and Simin is many things. She's a writer, and she's just completed her PhD, and the two of them
So
are
you should have
working.
said Dr. Simin.
Dr. Simin Patel, yes. But the two of them are working on a book on Irani cafes, and they've been at it for about a year. So we're going to talk to them about this
basically
book.
how they've been putting it together. And so for people who want a little preview of the book, you have an Instagram handle which you've called Irani Cafe and Co, right?
Yeah.
And there's lots of interesting stuff already over there, and stuff that people, Irani cafes are so much in the news and everybody knows about them. It's such an integral part of the city. But you guys have still managed to find a few things that maybe not everybody knows. Like, I didn't know a lot of Iranis have horseshoes at the entrance because they're considered good luck. And I didn't know that, Cosmopolitan, this little cafe near Harikrishnan Das Hospital, has a female proprietor. And not only that, they don't have any staff, right? They have they run everything themselves. So there's loads of interesting stuff in this. So firstly, I guess we wanted to ask you, how easy was it to sort of research this book?
Well, it's obviously it's ongoing, and most of the time Simin and me have just almost cold called or walked into a place because there's no other way of getting information.
Yeah.
There have been a few people who've really helped Simin and me along the way, Simin especially, and I think the biggest one would be Mr. Kohinoor.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
So we've
So
had
this
about
is the
The owner of
Kiani-
Britannia.
No, this is
yeah.
the Britannia guy.
Britannia,
Yeah.
right,
Mr.
right.
Kohinoor,
Yes.
Irani and...
Sorry, Aflatun, Shokri.
Oh God, no!
Kiani.
Yes. No.
Yeah, no, nothing. Anyway.
No, we've had about 20 interviews with Mr. Kohinoor and can go
Wow.
back at any time, any day to, just talk to him. And
So this is the
Now we're
sweet
friends.
old
I hope
gent.
you're bringing him little sort of trinklets from the UK.
Yes.
He's always yeah, no, and they all love Simin, so
With the
that
Queen's
helps.
head on
Yeah. Some sort of royal emblem.
Yeah.
no, basically we find that the older generation is much more willing to speak, but the children are the kind of the problem and very unwilling.
That's really interesting.
So-
Why do you think that's so, though?
I mean, they're wary of the press. They don't know what's, if we're going to say nice things. So basically, we sort of hope that no young person is around when we go first and we catch the older generation.
But it's usually
alone.
the older generation, isn't it?
Well, there are a lot of the younger people. I think it's also the lack of interest in the business, or it is exactly that. It's a business. They don't see it as, there's no nostalgia value attached to it. So then they don't really care to speak about it, and they don't know a lot of the stuff. But as you said, most of the times it's the older proprietors who will be there, and they're always willing to talk. Few grumpy ones, the stereotype, that's true.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's a big stereotype that they are like super,
grumpy,
ill-tempered. But,
flirtatious.
But I think that, Simin, if you go, I think they're sort of nicer to like,
Girls.
Oh yeah, no. I always let Simin go first because it's so much easier.
So what do you say? I'm working on a book.
Yeah, we're working. We ask you some questions. Hello, Mr. So and so, and then proceed from there. But
you've come across some really sort of interesting, quirky characters, haven't you?
Yes.
So I mean, tell us about a couple.
Okay. I mean, firstly, Mr. Kohinoor is an anomaly, and everyone knows him. So everyone thinks that every other Irani proprietor is like him, but everyone is the exact opposite of him.
But he's so friendly and sweet.
Yes.
Right?
and
sorry,
they're not like that. They're tough, rough. I mean, they've aged, but they're like into bikes and chicks and like the hard guys.
It's all about the women and the bikes and
the wine.
Are you talking about the younger generation?
No, it's the older generation. So
they're into bikes and chicks.
They're into bikes and chicks. So sometimes it helps that like when we went to a bakery and we had the motorcycle there, and he'd get into a conversation about that. And we have another bakery. And
do you want to name these bakeries?
Well, okay, let's go with New Persian Bakery for one. He's one of my favorite characters because of how crass he is. At Dadar.
Okay.
Yeah. So he basically, when I met him the first time, that was one of the few people I met without Simin for the first time, and he saw my helmet and he was like, "Oh, what bike do you ride, etc., etc." And then he went,
right? What do you ride?
An Enfield, which is you should say Enfield. They like their Enfields or the RD 350s.
Okay.
Those are like their go-to bikes.
What about the Yazdi? I thought all Bawas went to Yazdis.
Yazdis,
Everyone's go to
right. They're not powerful bikes, so they like their Enfields and RD 350s.
Okay.
But so I met him, and I think he immediately went back to these days where he would sit with some girl from the colony behind on the bike, and then he would press the front brake gently and I told him my bike's a one-seater, no such thing happens on that. So, but
a lot can be read into that.
But that's what he
said.
That's
a polite version,
But no,
tell us the impolite stories. Come on, that was still like sort of PG-13.
So let's stick to New Persian Bakery itself. And you're there, you're shooting in between their gaps, you're waiting for something to happen. He's sitting beside you. You don't want to, you make small talk. And I asked him once, which school did you go to? And he's like, I went to the so-and-so school in Panchgani. I was like, oh, okay, that's where Freddie Mercury went. I was like, that fucking homo tried to suck my cock. And I was like,
okay, there going to be a lot of beeps.
Sorry about that. And I'm thinking, I'm sitting in the middle between Dadar and Parel in a bakery. All these local Maharashtrian women and Catholic women are there to Diwali. They've come to bake their biscuits and stuff.
That's an interesting, by the way, aside that you can actually go there and bake your own biscuits.
Yes, you can. For 20 rupees
but no,
a tray.
Anyway, we want to know more about it. Mr. New Persian.
Yeah, it was just it was a strange experience talking about Freddie Mercury, doing something to this old uncle, and then he obviously launched into a story about how he once came to his dorm and he, all the boys liked it, but when he was touchy-feely, it's a boarding school back in the 1930s, I don't know,
Wow.
But he said, but he tried to suck me and I just gave him one kick. So, that's his story. And I don't, initially I thought it might be true, but I have my doubts now.
Well, is that going into the book? Probably
It
might.
But in reason.
Well, give us another kooky example.
Well, Simin, which one is your favorite
Well,
cookie exactly?
we've apparently heard about some legendary.
Oh yeah, that's Simin's friend with the hard. Simin, you want to tell us about him?
No, there is one cafe whose uncle, it's very well known, had this erection for 13 days at a stretch and was in hospital, and it's a very well known story in the community, and so I've heard it from different sources. And
Wow, is
this uncle
like
was like a
local-
Mr. Bombay. He was like a gangster, hung around with his Haji Mastan and all.
What did he eat or drink?
No, so then they kind of said that there was some accident. He got hurt with some bike something.
Basically, he was trying to
Nerve
park
was
his
hurt
bike.
with
Maybe he
parking.
pressed the brake gently.
Gently
and then went a little wrong.
The other became the other. Yeah.
Wow, I bet listeners are not expecting such stories.
No, not at all.
Irani cafe
so that's all
stories.
the anecdotal stuff. But what about the archival stuff? Now, a lot of
Right.
this is like you've been going to people and talking to them. It's a lot of oral history, right? So,
Right.
how easy has it been to sort of get archival material? And Simin, you've been consulting with Dishum, right? This cafe in the UK,
right.
which is basically themed around Iranis. It's
Yes.
a cafe in the UK, a chain. So you've helped them do that kind of thing. But
Yes.
here, for your own book, like
Yes.
when you've been trying to find photographs or
Yeah.
advertisements and things like that.
Yeah. The cafe owners help us and give us anything they have. So old photographs, menus, things like that we get from them. And then we haven't gone to the archives really as of now for the book, but for my PhD research I had a chapter on these Iranis.
Okay.
And that's when I did some research on how these people came from Iran to Bombay, what were the
Okay.
circumstances, who were basically refugees, political refugees or famine refugees, and how they built up the trade. So,
Well, since you've mentioned this, there's a legend,
Yeah,
and you can
yeah.
tell us how true this is
Yeah,
or
yeah.
not, that they came to Bombay, several of them, on the
Yeah.
backs of mules.
yes, so I mean, they do say that. They see different stories. So you get mules, you get by ship from Karachi to Bombay.
That's a half-ass story.
So,
So
no, I mean-
what's the? I mean, is there any historical accuracy as to how they came here?
I mean, I have sources say about going by ship, but that was like a concerted effort to get these refugees from Iran to Bombay in these times of famine, with the Parsi community helping that process. So that is documented. But a lot of people say they walked, came on mules, but I have to verify
It's
that.
difficult to verify.
Yes, yes.
these
But with the
things.
cafes, I mean, they have preserved menus, they have preserved, sort of old bills and things like that. They've done that. I mean, has there been, because we're so bad at archiving in general,
Yes,
right? I mean,
yes.
Well, I think it's more out of not trying to archive, but like kind of just hoarding. It's there, they don't care. A lot of the
Okay.
stuff is
So it's
just
good that
lying
they are-
around,
they are
and then they'll
hoarders.
dig it up. Yeah,
A few of
you
them,
know,
a few
yeah.
of them,
And
yeah.
I think a lot of, maybe like a few photos that we found have been old, but by and large, it's just stuff that it's lying around, or it's there because of some sort of case that's playing out, and they need to dig
Yeah.
out old receipts and bills and stuff. But
cases. So is that like...
It's a big thing.
Are there loads of those happening?
all over the place.
And I think
man.
that's probably one reason for that is because a lot of the cafe owners are related, isn't that
Oh,
right?
yeah.
So there's a
Related
very
and-
complicated ownership patterns.
Yes,
Isn't that
it's
correct?
it's a partnership ownership
Okay.
pattern. And say, so Mr. Kohinoor is like the senior partner at Britannia, for example. But it's because there are so many partners and then so many heirs that you have all these legal disputes. The most are over partnership. And that's why, like, say, Bastani has shut, for example,
Okay.
and other,
And
Yeah.
a lot of them can't even sell if they want to, because it's divided into so many.
So nobody's agreeing.
Yeah, or even then, it's just not a
Yeah.
lot of money at the end of it. It's
Yeah.
not worth anyone's
Yeah.
time.
People are constantly talking about how it's disappearing, right? I mean, so how many were there at their peak, and like today, what does the number stand? Like, do you guys have any like rough estimate about
So
that?
Mr. Kohinoor has actually taken us on this tour of all the Irani cafes of Bombay. So
Oh,
he
wow.
goes, Acha, now, coming down this road, there is, Piccadilly, then there is Union Jack, whatever. So through that, we've come to about 150, we've covered 150 cafes with him, say, in the 1950s.
Wow. Okay.
But today you'd easily find 50, including bakeries.
And the smaller ones all over the place.
Yeah.
The Chilia-owned ones and, so...
Right. And so the owners are both, I mean, I guess most of them are Zoroastrian Iranis, but there are a fair number of Muslim Iranis
I
as
think
well.
it's more or less even, right? There are quite a few Muslim Irani cafe owners as well. Like, I think pretty much everything on Mohammad Ali Road and...
Radio is one of them.
Radio is one of them, yeah.
So, no, actually, so there's a Chilia community who are sort of newer players in the trade. So you have Muslim Iranis, you have Zoroastrian Iranis, and then you have Chilias who own, say, Olympia, Radio Cafe.
Gulshan-e
the whole Muhammad Ali Road stretch.
And this community is from, is it
from
Iranian?
Gujarat, Muslims,
Right.
who started out in Bombay as Victoria drivers, then became taxi drivers, and then somehow started also as managers for these cafes, of the Irani cafes.
And then took them over.
Yes. So we have 3 communities now in the trade.
You felt, you met a lot of the people who also moved back to Iran, and then instead of selling the business to someone outside or within the community, they'd give it to the manager, and that's how some of the Chilias came to own it as well.
Yeah.
And they're a very tight-knit community. So if you go to Olympia at Colaba, you'll see that all of them more or less come from the staff and stuff. They all come from the same town or village, So.
Yeah.
And I think that's it's also what the Iranians did before. So it's been a continuation of sorts.
And I think the partnership structure of the Chilias is a little different, and there are more partners and smaller percentages for maybe the people who work there as well.
Oh, okay.
But not...
ESOPs. And we've had places like Dishum come up, but of course that's in the UK. But even in like Bombay recently, I mean, it's been around in Delhi. There's like a place called Soda Bottle, Bombaywalla, which is started by the guys who run Olive, and this is a sort of modern version of Irani cafe, right? And it's packed all the time. It is like you go there, they don't take reservations, you have to wait at least half an hour every time you go. I've only been there maybe on like during the busy times, lunch and dinner, but like I don't know. It's interesting to me that you actually have to wait for a table there, while a lot of Irani cafes are sort of pretty empty nowadays. What do you guys think of this? I mean, what do you think of Soda Bottle?
Well, for one, actually, I haven't visited it, and I don't intend to.
Oh, okay.
You
don't intend
to? No, I wouldn't. And
why not?
I don't know. It just feels like such a knockoff in a way, right? And I mean, it all exists, like you said. They are the original, authentic Irani cafes.
Serving pretty much the same menu.
I don't want to go to a mall. I think it's in a mall in Bombay.
No, it's not.
No, it's at BKC.
It's in BKC.
Which
but
is
it's one of those glass towns.
Mall-like, exactly.
Yeah.
And so there's no reason. I think I'd ruin the whole Irani cafe experience for myself by actually. Maybe 95 years from now, there's no Irani cafe, and that's the only place I might. But
you will be around.
We will all be around.
I'm quite young. I'm like 15, so maybe.
No, I think these modern cafes or whatever you want to call them, they have like shrewd business like models, and there is no time to like stop and stare sort of thing. You know, there are people on your back, you have to leave, but that's every other restaurant in Bombay. And I've come to appreciate the cafes a lot more because of the amount of time you can just sit with a chai, and they're okay with that. You know, so.
But you know what's interesting is that I saw this on your Instagram. Obviously, is that how. We all know about the different rules that they have, no talking loudly, no combing hair. One of them has put up a new sign saying no laptops or desktops.
No desktops, that's but they've removed it since then. I think they realized their mistake.
But that's amazing.
Oh, they removed the desktop part, but they're saying no laptops. So basically no free Wi-Fi and stuff like that. So you can't but maybe that's also
true.
kind of like,
true.
You don't come here to work. You come here to sort of...
You can stare into space, but not into your laptop.
And
which is a great thing.
I think once at Sasanian.
Sasanian.
I'm sorry, I should know that. But someone did open a laptop, and the manager immediately went up to them and said, you can't do this. And so they're like, about 5 minutes. He's like, no, the owner's going to come. You have to switch it off. So they're pretty strict and rigid about that. So, like Simin has the experience of actually sitting at cafes. I think that's because you're Simin, and I think the rest of us feel pressure to finish our chai and bread and like scoot, because the waiter's always like buzzing around.
But I mean that's the sense that you get at any Irani cafe.
Exactly.
That you can just sit there over biscuits and chai.
As long as you're ordering, it's not a coffee shop. You're not lingering.
So even if you have a quarter cup of chai, I guess you can sit there for a bit. But like most of these Irani cafes, I mean, I don't think any of them, except for I've only come across a couple that serve Irani food.
Right.
Like they serve only Parsi food. Right. Like Universal used to serve a couple of Irani dishes, and Piccadilly started serving Irani food.
So what's the difference for people who may not know?
Well, Irani food...
I mean, there are clear differences, right? There's a spice level difference.
Yes, that's a major difference.
Yeah, like, for example, they have this one pulao type thing which has masoor, and it has a lot of
cello
dill.
and stuff as well.
Exactly. And then they have a stew with various greens and with mutton. So Universal, I remember, had started serving a couple of Irani dishes. I mean, I don't know if they still do.
Yeah.
But by and large, they pretty much serve standard Parsi fare, not Irani fare.
Spicier than Irani fare.
Yes, and which is also actually new, relatively new, like say 30 years old or like 40 years old. And so traditional cafes are called chai pani places.
Right.
So Mr. Konir will say, okay, this was only chai pani place. And then you had, then ban maska and all was sort of part of chai pani. And so Parsi food comes in the 70s, and Iranian food is around that time as well. They didn't start with serving Iranian kebab and herbs and dry fruits and all that kind of stuff.
And also it's a business decision. I don't think it's something, we enjoy eating as much. You probably eat it once in a blue moon, but it's not, you prefer Parsi food because the spice agrees more with the Indian. Yeah.
And like some have gone to Chinese as well, right? Have moved to Chinese food.
Yeah, so Sanyan has a Chinese menu.
Yeah, so that's another business sort of.
But like places like Yazdani are still, I mean, it's not just chai pani, but they don't serve any food. It's just bakery and chai. Yeah.
Cool. So before we wrap up, I know this is like a obvious question, but you guys have a favorite, and why?
I have a favorite person, Mr. Kohinoor, but setting wise, there's a small cafe called Café de la Paix on Girgaon Road, now called JSS Road, sort of behind Opera House. And that's my favorite setting, but my favorite person is Mr.
Sure.
Yes.
And why is that your favorite setting though?
It's just an untouched cafe,
it's quite
untouched
a beautiful
with time, and a beautiful corner, and a lovely little pan shop outside, which is also old and part of the structure with wooden doors and like the pan setting. So,
I think I like B. Mehran the most, just because I like all the drama that surrounds it. In the sense, it's also right by the station, so you get like such an interesting crowd of people coming in. If you go in the morning, you have people who are just setting out to work. You have like laborers who finished the market for the day, but also the whole little stint that they had with like, we're shutting down, and everyone was sobbing. And it's also a beautiful place, and I think they're like one of the few places which has maintained their family room, which is kind of nice. So I think for me it's B. Mehran. It's just
Okay.
Cool, and we'll have you back for our next section, Metro Station.
Hi, I'm May, and I'm a huge fan of the indie music scene in our country. A scene that's relatively underground, even though it sometimes speaks its head overground, but there's no shortage of talent, and I get the privilege of interviewing some of the most awesome musicians on my show. I've had the likes of Euphoria, Krish Kale, Hardcore, Randolph Correa. I've had singer-songwriters, folk singers, electronic music producers, playback singers, rappers, fusion artists, instrumentalists, classical musicians, and so on. Whether mainstream or not, these people have chosen to release their original music, and these are the people currently shaping the direction in which our music scene is heading. Join me on my show every Monday and tune in to discover the unique talent coming out of India today. You can catch Made in India on your favorite podcasting app or our very own IVM podcast app.
Metro Station.
Welcome back, and on Metro Station we have Hashim and Simin again, who are going to tell us about all the other cool stuff that they do. Simin runs a blog called Bombaywalla, which is like this treasure house of information about Bombay history. And so tell us what sort of inspired you to start this.
So we started this 3 years ago with my friends from Malhar, from Xavier's. We've stayed in touch over the years, and it sort of started with a failed grant application, if I remember correctly. And then we'd done this little digital thing, and we said, oh gosh, we can't waste it. And then, sort of the blog idea came up, and the same departments that we were in Malhar. So our tech comms guy did all the comp stuff, set up the website, the branding design guy, graphics chap did all the, Siddhanshu did all the branding, and then I sort of did the content. So, and my friend DJ also helps started with the photographs. So that's how it kind of germinated. And then Hashim and Harsh Acharya have joined the team with their photographs. So it's sort of just it was a failed grant application basically.
So how do you populate the website? I mean, do you just sort of, when you're walking around the city, if something strikes you, do you put that into the blog, or how do you come up with stuff? Yeah, so you have to weigh the photo and the text, and so sometimes I have a story but I don't have a photo, and it can be the other way around. So I have to wait sometimes if there's a photo but I don't have any material, and obviously I want to wait for Hashim and Harsh's photos because they're professional and they're much nicer than the ones I take. So it's all a lot of waiting, seeing, and then you just play it by ear basically. Right. But these photos, Hashim, do you want to tell us about how you pick places, or is it just if you're walking around and seeing stuff, or is it random, or?
It's usually not random, but it starts off that way. You're walking around and you find something that's interesting, you find out what's interesting about it, and most of the time I will go back. Because I am a photographer, but I usually don't walk with my camera. I just prefer not having anything on me and walking around. So it's usually going back and creating something, and then, Simin has a look at it. If she wants to use it,
I want to use all his photographs.
Yeah, humble brag.
But he has a nice JJ flyover platewalla story.
That is one of the most striking images that I think
he no longer, he passed away, I think a year ago. But anyway, so the JJ flyover is one of the most interesting parts of the city to me.
So just say a bit about this house. So that listeners know what we're talking about.
Well, so the thing is, when the JJ flyover came back, I think it's about 12 years ago or something, it opened up a part of the city to the rest of us, which you don't usually land up visiting. A lot of people don't go to Mohammad Ali Road, and suddenly here you were looking into these houses. You could see, the flyover was so close to the home.
Exactly,
sometimes it was a couple of feet away. And there was this one house which was so interesting because it was full of plates. And, it was a house I always used to spot. So I decided to go up there and just ask them what the deal was. Where are these plates from? The plates are all made in China type plates, but you can't tell from the flyover. But his name was Mr. Banaraswala, and his daughter lives with him, and she was exhausted of this whole plate system. He was so proud of it that when the flyover was made, he used to keep his windows open so that people could actually see his plate collection.
Because I think everyone who's crossed
has seen
exactly. collection.
Yeah.
And she they'd have people who, before when two-wheelers were allowed on the flyover, you'd have people just break outside his house and yell inside and ask, "Sale hai kya? Bech rahe ho?" And because they look like antiques, so. But I think he enjoyed that. And I think so I did a picture for them.
And this was featured in your blog?
So did you shout across the flyover saying, "Can I come in?"
No, I didn't. I went straight to their house. But it's good because I think they've got a bit of coverage after that. I think they were used in a couple of fashion shoots, which they got paid decently for.
Okay.
So keeping their windows open has paid off.
Has paid off. Letting all those fumes in has some reward, actually.
Yeah.
But one of your recent posts, it's about Cosmopolitan, which is, I think you've written a lot about Cosmopolitan on your blog. But the picture itself is about a Hindu lodge.
Oh, right.
So it's about a Hindu lodge, and you say that Cosmopolitan and sort of cafes like Cosmopolitan and shops sort of name themselves that because of the number of institutions and places that were specific to communities, and these places wanted to announce that they were open. So that's quite an interesting detail. How did is that something that you read? How did you
No, I think that would be more from my research. and looking at like Parsi-specific structures in the city and institutions only for Parsis, their names, Parsi General Hospital, things like that, Parsi lying in hospital, and different kinds of
lunatic
things.
asylum lane.
Yes, exactly. So basically, I realized that there were all these facilities popping up, institutions for specific communities, for their members, and therefore these little stores and cafes had to then sort of this is just surmising, but it sort of could work, that these guys were saying, no, basically we're open to all. And so there's a lovely cosmopolitan name. There's the Hindu Lodge on the other side of the road, and there's the Har Kisan Das Hospital next to it, and there's a horseshoe at the entrance of the cafe, which is
and you talk a little bit about nomenclature, how places were named, could you tell us a little bit how name changing, because earlier they would be like a Indian, like a Hindi name and a thing, and that changed.
So basically it's all, by and large, it's alliterative. So you Seva, Southern, sort of something like that, Money, Mount, etc. But the second name to describe the structure would always be English. So like lodge, mansion, etc. And then I think with the coming of Art Deco, this is again just to surmise that you have both Indian names. So you have the Bhavans, you have the Mahals and everything starting. And you see that nicely on Marine Drive. More towards the Gymkhana side, where everything is like Kapoor Mahal, or in Matunga you see that again. So with the coming of Art Deco, you have more Indian names for the structures, which is interesting because you think of Art Deco as a Western style and everything. But
and do you think that had to do with sort of because it was closer to independence? Or?
Yes, very much so. So I think Art Deco served a very different purpose in Bombay, which was as a sort of pro-independence style. This is how we articulated our national identity in Bombay in the years leading up to independence,
by taking inspiration from Miami.
Yes, exactly, and not Britain, so America and the rest of maybe Europe a little bit, but definitely not Britain. So that was our big.
And another thing, you talk about how their entire neighborhoods, like people always associate Art Deco with like Marine Drive, but there's places like Matunga where you've got
and even parts of Sion,
which has a lot of. Yeah, you can't drive around the city or walk around without seeing an Art Deco structure wherever you go. So the suburbs are populated everywhere. So
Hashim, do you have a particular place or particular places where you like shooting?
Just walking around.
Well, I guess like for a lot of photographers, as you'll see, they're drawn to places of their childhood. So for me, I think Bindi Bazaar and Mohammad Ali Road and that area was something that I used to visit a lot as a kid for different reasons, because I belong to the Dawoodi Bora community. So it's very interesting to see the changes that are constantly occurring there. It's the first cluster development project in the state. So Bindi Bazaar is going to completely change. So I like going there and just seeing what it's like. It also, talking about Art Deco, Mohammad Ali Road has so much of vernacular Art Deco happening as well. So there's a whole mix of stuff in that area which I think a lot of us miss. So I like going there a lot, but I think mostly it's just the older parts of the city.
What about the suburbs? How often, does Bombaywalla venture into the suburbs?
It's
Matunga,
yes.
Central suburb.
So honestly, it's also about the information I have, and recently I read a very good book on the making of Matunga and South Indian identity in the setting of Matunga by Nikhil Rao, and so that's helped me make all these little posts on Matunga. But I need the information and I need a photo, but there's a South Bombay bias which is changing.
And how much of your PhD research has fed the blog?
Oh, a lot. So may not be directly, but all the archival material I collected from the archives, the Maharashtra State Archives at Kalagoda, that helps me. So I look through ads, I look through all my material. If I have a word, I'll key it in, get all the articles, and then it's integral to the content of the
Have
blog.
you mentioned what your PhD was on? It was on the Parsi community, but specifically...
The Parsis in Bombay from 1860 to 1921 specifically, and basically looking at how they became a community, how they modernized, how the Parsi that we understand today and having these certain features or whatever aspects, how that was made.
Yeah.
And I sort of say it was complex and it was fraught and wasn't easy.
Yeah. And, in a way, sort of both your work, even though you're working together on the blog and on the book, Hashim, with you, I mean, you're really sort of like this... documentation is such an important part of your work, right? I mean, it's automatically, even if it's not conscious, and stuff that you've been sort of doing over the years, and you obviously love Bombay, but you're also a travel photographer, and you do a lot of travel work. So, do you find that it's easy to be like a tourist in your own city and like discover things about it?
No, it's actually not, but that's, I think, the most amazing bit about it, because it's home, and discovering something that you don't know about a place that is so important to you is even more interesting than actually going to a place where you don't know anything and then, finding out stuff. But also, I think people will, they form a large part of my photos, because and especially in the case of Bombay, I want to see how the past is occupied by the present. So I will try to see what is happening in that space now. For example, we were talking of the almond oil pressers. You know, they are located at Paidoni, and you can go there with your own dry fruits or different seeds or spices, and they will press them for you and make an oil.
Is this cold pressed oil?
It is cold pressed oil. It's not yet hipster. It's getting there.
After this podcast. You heard it first.
Cold pressed juice is hipster. Now it's cold pressed oil.
And they sell all sorts of stuff, including like aphrodisiacs and stuff. So it's and they're still very popular.
So
like
you make your own aphrodisiac? Is this like a new workshop that we can conduct?
I think we should go there and find out. Yeah, but I guess they just throw a few spices. It's a secret recipe, so it's one of those. Yeah, he's not going to.
Anyway, okay, so that's it for Metro Station.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you guys. This was so interesting.
Thank you.
And so we'll be back next week. Meanwhile, follow the Paodcast on Savan and visit thedailypao.com, where you can sign up for our weekly newsletter.
Yeah, and we'll see you next week with Power Bites. If you like listening to the Paodcast, check out Made in India with May, the best Indian indie music podcast in the country.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is your captain speaking. Sorry to say, but there's been a slight delay due to the apocalypse having suddenly begun. As you can see, there's death, destruction, and chaos taking place all around us. But don't you worry, food and drinks will be served shortly, and I would recommend checking out
IVM Podcasts
to get some of your favorite Indian podcasts. We'll keep you going till this whole thing blows over. Thank you.